Today, I'm going to be talking about how can publishers build on-platform community. So something that I've kind of experienced in my own career is you kind of learn that people come to you for different reasons. And something that I think publishers are becoming more and more aware about these days is how readers are actually coming for community. Community is the product for them. I want to give you a little bit of a background as to where I started my journey. So I started my journey a long, long time ago at a company called Tumblr. Once upon a time, I would be making GIFs of myself. I'd be making GIFs of my dog and all of the people I worked with, and creating a very New York weird platform. I bring this up because it's where I really learned about building community products. Tumblr was one of the original community spaces on the internet. Once upon a time when the internet was incredibly fun to be on. We were powered by creators. We created safe spaces for people to be able to find other like-minded people who had the same interests as they did. We were weird. We were interactive. You could do things in the ways in which you wanted to do them. We created our own UX patterns. Tumblr was the creator of the reblog, which allowed you to take a piece of information and content and redistribute it by sharing it with your network. And then Twitter, a couple of years later, did retweets. And then something really important, Tumblr was a destination. People came to Tumblr because they wanted to find community. They wanted to meet other people. They wanted to do self-expression. And so ever since this time of me working at Tumblr, creating GIFs of myself, I've carried that thought of how do you think about community when you're building digital products? This moment for all of us in this room, I think we're thinking about a lot of different things. So search and social used to be our front doors, our top of funnel for traffic, how our audience came to us. That's diminishing. The internet is changing. What's even real anymore? I mean, we're having this conversation about misinformation, disinformation, the ability to create anything you want using AI. How do we kind of distinguish between what is real and what is not? We're thinking about creating our own spaces that espouse our own values. We've been out on the internet for such a long time. I think sometimes we've lost the ability to control how are we taking our own values and our own brand into these spaces in which we're sharing it with absolutely everything else. And then I think this is a really important point of, is there a difference between journalism and content? I think there's a very clear answer to that. But I think we have to do more work to convince our audience, our readers, as to what the difference between what it is that journalists produce and what news organizations do, and what you may be able to get for free on the internet if you're just browsing TikTok, Instagram, etc. Another challenge for news organizations is that it's typically been very solo. It's a lonely experience. It's been very transactional. People come to read, they read an article, they read something else, and then they leave. It's a very solely lonely experience. If you look at how we use social networks and social platforms, we're doing things with other people. Publishing has typically not facilitated that sort of experience. And so what I think a lot about is like, what is that challenge in this moment? So news organizations, I think, are seeking deeper relationships and meaningful engagement with their audiences. I think we're thinking a lot about like, how do we create interactive products and experiences? And I think an important part about this is, I don't think it's optional anymore. I think we have to be creating things that help facilitate connection, have to keep creating things that allow people to do things with the things that we create. And then finally, with the advent of AI that we've now been talking about for the last couple of years, I think it also opens up new possibilities for us to rethink how we create human-centric community and relationships. So my provocation here is, how do we build deeper, direct relationships with our audience again? I think some good news here is that it already happens. In digital spaces, we already have people underneath the surface who are doing things with each other, but just may not be doing it connected in a very open way. We already facilitate curious minds who come for the same reason. We facilitate spaces through our journalism and through our reporting that brings people together. This idea that it has existed from my time going all the way back to Tumblr and everything else that I've done, is this idea of micro communities. We always think about community being this one big, large thing, lasts a very long time. Communities can also last a very short period of time and re-emerge and reform, and you form new communities with different groups of people. I think news organizations do that every single day. When you publish a piece of reporting, you have a group of people who come and read that in a given moment in time, and then they kind of disperse. And that's okay. Micro communities are good. You find commonality around the shared interests and the values that you have. Those micro communities can also then form larger communities. Another thing I also kind of think a lot about is like, we have to reimagine what it is that we do and what we can do for our audience. We don't have to be limited in the thing that we've done for the last 100 years. So one way in which I kind of think about this is, how do we reimagine what those ecosystems are and the things that we're creating? So we know we do published reporting. It's at the core of what a lot of folks do here in this room and what our institutions have done for a very long time. We also facilitate spaces for incredible writers and incredible talent, the people who have experience and expertise. We also create spaces in which our users can interact with each other, whether that's through conversations, through user-generated content, through interactive experiences. We think about the things that we don't publish. So every single time a piece of reporting is put into the hands of users, all the material that maybe wasn't used, the demo of a song, for example, how might we make that accessible to our audience? And then how are we thinking about complementary experiences? A lot of kind of familiarity around these things around games. Like, we want people to have something else to do when they come to read our reporting. But how do we think about live chats or meetups in the offline world? All of these layers are different experiences that we're actually creating. How do we make them more explicit? And more importantly, how do we create some sort of connective tissue that draws those user journeys for our audience, for them, so that they're navigating through all of the things that we actually do. Layers in that way also allow us to think a little bit differently about what that entry point is. So the best entry point into any of our platforms may differ for different users, different moments in time, different utility that they're looking for. And so some readers may come for your article, the majority of folks do, but maybe others first come in because of the writer who wrote the piece. Maybe others come in because they want to learn and interact with other like-minded people who are on your platform in your audience. So surfacing those layers can help show the breadth of what is available to do on our platforms. And then essentially, we're still motivated by business outcomes, right? We still want to see subscription growth. We want to see advertising revenue. We want to see an increase in retention of our audience. We want to see increase in reader loyalty. By creating this value, we know that there's a flywheel here that exists, that the longer we keep our audience engaged, the more value we deliver to them, the longer they're willing to stay, and it can feed back into our own business objectives that all of us have, that we want to be sustainable. We want to make money. We want to have jobs. And so the why, what, how of community. So there's a lot of different ways in which we can think about community. How do our journalists interact with each other? How do our journalists interact with our audience? Like, our audience come for the talent and want to be near them. How do our audience interact with each other? I'm going to focus in on the last one here around audience-to-audience interactivity. And so one path towards community that I think a lot about is, how do we do facilitated conversations instead of just having comments on our surfaces? Comments are broken. I mean, they've been broken for a long time. They kind of suck. Toxic, not really welcoming, pretty chaotic, have basically embraced all the bad behaviors of the internet that have existed over the last 20 years. And we've often just brought them into our own house. They're created for engagement and not for impact. They've continued that online toxicity and lack of facilitation. We're losing control over how we engage our own audience and being able to control having things that are arranged around our own values and our own structures. We've inherited poor UX from social medias. And importantly, I think instead of deferring that responsibility onto other platforms, we have to think about how we have a role to play. How do we build those products on our own terms, in our own platform, to develop that engagement and do that facilitation? So one kind of train of thought here is, facilitate conversations with a hands-on approach to nurture the behaviors that we want to see. Here are 9 quick ideas as to how we maybe can get started on that. So lesson number 1 here. So learn what works from the real world. We have a lot of learning as to how we interact as people with each other in real world offline spaces. We've been doing this for thousands of years. We have dinner parties in which we exchange ideas and have conversation. We meet strangers who we don't know, and we're not throwing fire emojis at them as we shake their hand. There are things that we should be learning from the offline world that we can create online digital experiences for. We need to focus on impact over engagement. How do we create spaces that help people learn, that get exposed to different ideas or perspectives, that help them become informed and become smarter? We have to have a clearer articulation of what it is that we're trying to create at the end of the day. It's not just a space so people can talk. It has to be a space in which there's an intentional outcome at the end, which guides us through the way in which we think, the thing that we end up designing, but like what's that impact that we're actually going for on our own surfaces? So one thing here, which I've learned a lot about, is instead of creating a space and saying talk with each other, how might you facilitate conversations so you're actually guiding people to talk about a very specific thing? Guided topics, guided prompts. We ask each other questions because we're curious what each other think. If you remove that question and you just allow a group of people to start yelling, that's exactly what you're going to get. So think about the guided outcome that you're looking for and how a guided topic and conversation can help you create that. Enable your users to create identities. These are people who have interests, they have things that they're looking for, and the same way in which we create identities on LinkedIn, which are associated with our professional life, or on social media, or on Instagram, around the photos that I take. How do we think about the identity that our audience can actually share with each other on our own platform so that they can learn about each other? Enable new ways for readers to form relationships with each other. We talk about social graphs on the internet all the time. How do you think about the social graph that you're trying to create for your own audience? And again, what's the impact and outcome that you're actually trying to create by connecting your users with each other? Don't inherit bad UI UX from social media. Just because Facebook created a like button does not mean we all have to put like buttons on our website. How do we really think about creating intentional UX patterns that are beneficial to the things that we're trying to create? So for one example, instead of having a like button and an upvote button and a plus button in a conversational space, how do you create ways in which people can express how something made them feel? How can other users then use that reaction as a way to navigate the space that they're inside of? Espouse your own values within your own walls. It's okay to lean in and say, this isn't a platform for everyone. Every behavior is not okay. How do you take your brand? How do you take your values? How do you take your tone and actually design product experiences around that for your audience instead of generalizing it to try to appeal to everyone? And then thinking about AI, how do we use it in really smart ways that can still continue to help us facilitate human-to-human interaction and connection? So in the conversational space, Google does incredible work through Jigsaw with Perspective API that helps you do moderation really, really well. How do you use AI to maybe identify those prompting questions that you're trying to ask your audience in those conversational spaces? How do you allow your users to do conversational discovery? When you have a room with 1,000 people, How can you help someone understand what's going on instead of putting all of the work on them? And then how might you use AI to actually connect people together through personalization and identification of interests? I truly believe this, right? The future of news is a participatory experience. It's one in which it can't just be transactional. It's one in which we want our audience to lean in and do things with us and with each other. And so publishers have to not think about communities as something you just add on to your website or to your articles. They can't be an afterthought. They have to be how you think about the entire platform and the experience you're trying to create. Interaction isn't an expectation from users anymore. They're expecting it when they come to you. And I truly believe publishers who can embrace this can really, truly build those deep relationships that we're all looking for with our audience on our own terms. Thank you so much.